Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today I've had a look at Marincess. I think someone requested this at one point, I don't know, but I had some of the cards anyway and I thought this deck is fairly cheap, this deck is fairly competent, why not give it a go? And I came up with a version that is a tiny bit different than the versions that you would be seeing on the ladder. It obviously lacks some of the play starters because we're not running every good Marincess card at 3. We have to make certain cuts to make this deck still fairly cheap, but still fairly viable, and I think I have managed to do this in one way or another. The monster lineup might be a tiny bit too much. There is possibly stuff that you can shave down a little bit, but there is a reason for this, and I'll be talking about that in a second. I decided to run a bit of a bigger lineup of Marincess main deck monsters, mainly because of the fact that technically you want to be running 3 of Springirl, for example, you want to be running 2 of Dive, you want to be running the 3 of Mining. You could argue you might want to be running 3 of Pascalus, but I felt like, especially in the competitive versions, I tried it out at the test hands and whatnot with versions other people are playing, you do sometimes run into hands where you just start with Pascalus and no other Marincess monster. It is obviously not the best thing, considering that is how you get your play started with this card. So I feel like 2 of this, even in a competitive variant, usually makes a bit more sense. But the thing is, we haven't got access to the combo of Springirl, we haven't got access to 2 dives, for example, we haven't got access to Cynet Mining, which would get us one of our 1-card starters out, and also we are lacking certain extra deck monsters that make it easier to going into the Link 4 monster, so I decided maybe crank up the main deck monster count of Marincess a bit more, and this card came to mind. First of all, it's a good target to send off blue Tang, because this card can be special summoned from the graveyard if you have 2 monsters, 2 Marincess monsters on board, which in your combo you usually will have, and then you can special summon this card from your hand or graveyard, so even if you draw into it, not too bad. Plus it's a normal summonable Marincess monster, so you can be doing something with that as well. It's not too bad, and so on and so on and so on. The effect that gets banished is okay. There's, I think, one Marincess card that actually interacts with banished Marincess monsters, but we do not play this one in this specific variant, but you can always include it as well. I think it's the other Link 4 that we don't have. 1 Ash Blossom, a Joyous Spring, mainly because this deck usually is a hand trap machine. So obviously all the spells that you see here, the go first and go second spells, especially Book of Moon, for example, you can easily cut down by playing like triple Maxi, by playing all kinds of hand traps, triple Ash Blossom, and obviously the Graveyard Hate right now with Chilaments being around. You might want to be buckling down on this one. So yeah, 1 Ash Blossom though is in here because this deck runs on hand traps, not like Sylvans, for example, who do not really care about it because they want to mill more and whatnots. But this one comes for free in the Master Pack bundles, I want to say for free, so you can run you can justify running 1 in a budget variant, and obviously it has a great impact on the game. Same reasoning for Infinite Impermanence, and I'll talk about this now. Forbidden Droplet is the same thing, you also get it from the packs, and this card can be fairly good going first and fairly good going second. What you can be doing is, since this card now has been released in one of the Master Pack bundles, but I wasn't sure how many people have crafted this already, because it's not as meta relevant as Infinite Impermanence and Ash Blossom are, for example. So some people might have said like, gonna pass on this one, don't really care about the Master Packs, I'd rather go into like certain specific decks and not get Nibiru. Fair enough. If you have it, it does somewhat make sense playing it. First of all, it makes going second a lot easier if you draw into it, and it isn't terrible going first, because you have a certain Marincess card, which is this one. If you run this one, then you might want to consider running Nibiru as well, because with this one, you can, if only your opponent controls a monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard and special summon water Link monster from your graveyard, whose combined Link ratings equal exactly 3. So technically you can build up your board again after you've been disrupted by Nibiru, but keep in mind, Nibiru gives you 1 monster on board as well, so it's not only your opponent controls it, you have to rely on your opponent to destroy your Nibiru still, because it's their second turn, their first turn, but the second turn, so they could be attacking if you went first. But if they don't do this, then you might have a harder time building up your board. But Marincess is usually like 1 to 2 card starters and lots of recursion, so it's not too hard to get back into your place, even if you don't decide to run this card. After you've Nibiru the whole field, you can put up some more plays, but you lack certain stuff in the extra deck, so might not be the best choice. But if you feel like you want more options for going second, and Nibiru is reasonably strong at the moment, I'd say, at least, so yeah, could be an inclusion if you want to, because it also comes in the bundles. Let's talk more about the Marincesses. This is an easy 3 include in a budget deck because this card is very, very strong. It is somewhat of a 1-card combo. We obviously lack things like Splash Mage. I'll talk about this in a second. So you need certain additions to your lineup, but this card does a lot. You can normal summon it, then link it off, then add it back to your hand, then special summon it. So you already are in link 3, then you can go into Anemone, then you can get into a link 3, yeah, at this point before you have link 2, then you're in a link 3, and then you just need one more extender to actually work it out. And you can technically get that extender from the extra deck if you already drew into Battle Ocean, then you can go into Dive. Usually you want to have Ocean over Dive, in my personal opinion, but Dive can get you into your link monster, and at certain times the link monster is a bit better if you have a different kind of setup, because you still need the one equipped to it, because otherwise the link monster doesn't really do that much if you don't have any extra monsters equipped to it, and so on and so on and so on. There's a lot to consider. We have to run a 3 blue Tang. This card, in my opinion, is one of the best starters of this deck. It does the most, because not only can you send 1 card to the graveyard, that then you can recur it with one of the link monsters, but also you do the Salmon Great Foxy effect, and can possibly, since we run so many different Marincess monsters and so many different ones that actually do stuff in hand as well, you can get another card plus. So this card very, very important at 3 in my personal opinion. We have Marincess Pascalus. Can be quite nice, especially since you run such a high Marincess count, and I don't think crafting 2 of this will be wasted at any point, because I think every competitive version runs at least 2. You could argue for just running 1, but the graveyard effect is also not too bad, because you can in the next turn you can banish this card from your graveyard and target 1 Marincess Spell Trap in your graveyard, add to your hand, so you can get Dive back and you can get Battle Ocean back, which is very important because Battle Ocean is somewhat at the heart of this deck. You can already see Crystal Heart in here. Little Marincess pun. This card is okay, but obviously if you start with this and no other Marincess monster in your hand, then it's a bit screwed up. We have the issue of this card is a level 5, so even if you start with them, your plays have to be a tiny bit different. You have to then go into Coral Anemone before you go into the whole Marincess Sea Angel combo, because Sea Angel and Blue Slug both need level 4 or lower Marincess monsters, but the combo is still reasonably the same, so it doesn't matter overly. Now we have one of the other Marincess monsters that doesn't do anything special summon wise, but it does something. If a monster you control will be destroyed by effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead. Funny enough, it's not a Marincess monster, it protects all your monsters. Don't know why, a bit strange, but technically if you decide to play Abyss Dweller or a Stealth Kraken, then that can be helpful as well, funny enough. And also it has another effect that you can be using. You can banish 1 Marincess Trap and add 1 Marincess Trap with a different name. We won't be using this because all the other Marincess Traps are absolutely terrible. They're in a deck that doesn't seem too battle focused. They all have very battle focused effects, and I can see where this comes from. There's a Marincess, but they all boost attacks as well. Like this card boosts attacks if it's banished and so on. I don't quite understand why they thought, yeah, this is it. Maybe because it's an anime archetype, and anime archetypes always do some janky kind of stuff. Maybe it's that, but yeah, another level 4 monster that has protection, so if you link it off into the graveyard, it's not too bad, but it doesn't start any combos. This is mainly in here for having a Marincess monster in hand, so if you draw it, for example, with Springirl, then you can do multiple different things as well, and so on and so on and so on. If you draw it with Pascalus, it does stuff. It's a level 4, so if you want to be running things like Dweller or Kraken, whatever it's called, you can go into it with this one as well. So this has more of use than the other Marincess monsters. You could be running the one that you discard to boost attack, for example. It's not worth running it at all. A little tech in here that you don't have to run by. I felt like was quite neat, especially if you want to be running some of the rank 4 water monsters. Especially Abyss Dweller comes to mind because it's quite good at the moment. Silent Sea Nettle. If you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And with this card, you can extend quite well. It doesn't start your combos, obviously, so if you just start with this card and well, one of the ones that don't do anything, then you are kind of screwed. For example, like Pascalus plus this is nothing, this plus this is not really much. It's a level 4, that being said, but yeah, it doesn't do that much. You cannot special summon monsters except water monsters after. It doesn't matter because most of the other Marincess cards also kind of do this to you. And then one of the important effects as well, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target up to 3 water monsters, up to, very important, in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck. Very, very nice to recycle some of the extra deck stuff that you don't run at multiples, because we try to keep it as cheap as possible, obviously. So you can get your Link 4 bag with this one, for example, or you can get your Link 2 bag with this one, for example. So you have quite a lot of things you can be doing with that specific one. You could even recycle things like Abyss Dweller if you went into it with Sea Nettle and then it gets destroyed and you want it back. So that would be a thing. And technically you can also recycle main deck monsters. Usually it doesn't matter too much, but in theory you could. And since lots of the Marincess monsters only need 2+ water monsters, 2+ water monsters, 2 water monsters, and 2 water monsters, this still can be a decent card to work with this. So actually the combo even with this one works. So if you normal summon this one and then go into Sea Angel, you get a Surge, you summon this one, you go into Anemone, you get this one back from the graveyard, then you can still at least go into a Link 3. It's not amazing, but it does work somewhat. It's not, like I said, not amazing, but it does some stuff here. We have Marincess Springirl, very, very important. You can get to another summon out with this one. And if this card is sent to the graveyard for Link summon, you can send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard equal to the number of Marincess monsters you control. And then if a Marincess card was sent, you deal damage. It can be coming in handy sometimes, but the more important thing is you have so much recursion that adds stuff back from the graveyard to your hand that this effect can be quite nice. If you mill 1, 2, 3 cards, you could hit stuff like a Wave, for example, and get more out of this one. You can hit one of the other play starters. You can hit stuff like Mandarin into the graveyard. You can even hit like a Protection possibly, not too bad either. So this is quite nice, the effect, but make sure that before you use it, you kind of search Battle Ocean. I mean, you can add Battle Ocean back as well if you mill it, it's not that bad, but I preferred searching it beforehand and then use the add back effect on certain other cards. We run one Icejade Tremora, mainly because I decided to run quite a high lineup of monsters, I think 22 it is. And I felt like one of this would be nice. It gets you water monsters into the graveyard for an enemy, for example, can be helpful. And also this special summons one of your water monsters from your hand. So you have the combo of, oh, I special summon one of the Marincess, then I link it off into Blue Slug adds it back to the hand, then normal summon again, then use an enemy, and you also have a Link 3, but it doesn't obviously get you into a Link 4. Usually these kind of combos would, because there is stuff like Splash Mage. If you have Splash Mage, these cards all become a lot better, and that's why Splash Mage is the, in my opinion, the first card you should put into this deck if you have it. I didn't want to include it because you can play without it, especially with this lineup of monsters. It's not impossible, but this card makes the deck a tiny bit better, and it also works in different kind of decks. I just feel like it's annoying that this card is super rare. I wish it was a rare, but it isn't. So I didn't include it, but I definitely want to be talking about it, because with this one, you can then use an enemy and the card that you summon to go into this one, and then, unless it's obviously not a Cybers monster because you need 2 Cyberses, and then with this one you can revive an enemy, and then you have 2 Link 2 monsters, and then you can go into Aqua Argonaut. So you can run this card to massively increase the ceiling and of this deck, because this one enables you to go into crazier combos. But we already run quite a lot of super rares, and if you just want to get a feel of the deck and you already have some Marincess cards somewhere, then this would be the way to do it, and then instantly get this one. And then next I would say get Marincess Coral Triangle, because this one you can send one water monster from your hand to the graveyard. Water monster doesn't even have to be Marincess, and add one Marincess trap from your deck to your hand. So you could cut this down to 1 or 2 if you want to, and then you don't have to run 3, and then you can splash in some more hand traps, some more good stuff cards. And yeah, this also has recursion, so this is quite neat, and it's a lot better than Marbled Rock, for example. So we would be running this, including this in second. And then there's obviously all the stuff like the Kragan engine you could be running. You could be running stuff like Mr. Boy or Area. You could be running stuff like the second Link 4. A second Link 4, in my opinion, makes more sense if you play very many hand traps, because this card lets you draw another card by banishing a water monster, and then it gains attack. The thing is, though, it doesn't really help you if you then draw into a card that does nothing during your opponent's turn. Then you would much rather have Argonaut on field than this one. Yes, you can send one water monster from your hand to the graveyard and special summon one, but neither is it a quick effect, nor does it do all that much for your turn anyway. So I feel like, yes, Bubble Reef can be a very nice card, but it's more useful in a, well, let's say more hand trap focus build than this specific one. I decided to run triple Marincess Sleepy Maiden. It's quite a nice extender, and like I said, you need extenders a lot of the time to go into your level 4, because we do not have the Splash Mage combo. If you have it, then it becomes less important, but you also can send this to the graveyard and do some other kind of combo. If you decide to go not for Marincess Battle Ocean but for Dive with your Surge, then you can send this to the graveyard, and you can banish this from the graveyard and target one Marincess Link monster you control, equip it with one Marincess Link monster from your graveyard. So technically you have the Argonaut spell trap negate up then as well during your opponent's turn, so this is a thing you can be doing, and you can target one Marincess card you control and special summon this card from your hand. Only issue is it's not a level 4 monster, so it's level 5, so it doesn't work with these two links. Doesn't matter overly if you already have one other Marincess monster on board, because then you'll just use it later on in the combo. Sometimes it's a bit annoying, but if you have one of the other good place starters, then it's not too bad. Now one of the cards you won't be seeing in many Marincess decks, which is Moray of Greed, a card that works here pretty well, because not only do you run quite a high lineup of water monsters, you also have the option of you recycle quite a lot of cards to hand, especially if they then don't do much. You can use Moray of Greed after you've used some of your combos, and then hopefully draw into either, if you've already gone through your whole combo and you still have 2 water monsters in hand, which isn't unlikely, you can hopefully tuck them back into the deck and then draw into 1 or 2 more disruptive cards for your opponent's turn, so you can do this. And if you draw a hand that isn't really that playable and doesn't lack lots of play starters or can't get you into your link 4, then you can still do this and hope you draw into different cards that might help you do this as well. And in the worst case, this card can fetch an Ash Blossom. Hasn't so far, so I don't quite know the interaction with it, but since it doesn't shuffle for cost, I think if they Ash this, then you just put the card to the graveyard. You don't lose out on 2 water monsters as well. It's not like a Lure of Darkness or anything. I think it should be the way of you only shuffle back if the effect goes through anyway, and not in between, because it doesn't shuffle for cost. Correct me if I'm wrong though, but I think that is how it should work. Cynet Mining, very, very important card. Very, very important fact as well for Cynet Mining. This card comes in the Salamangreat structure deck. So for just 1,000 gems, you can pick up 2 of these and have a somewhat decent Salamangreat deck. I have made a deck profile of if you only have 2 Salamangreat structure decks, you can make a, well, at least playable deck out of it. It's still better than some other structure decks at 3, that being said, but I would need some other inclusions in the deck, but it's not awful. You can check that out on my channel if you want. So 2 Silent Mining isn't too bad. Obviously you want to be running 3, but I wanted to keep it as cheap as possible, and 2 is fair enough at this point. 1 Marincess Dive. This card can technically special summon 1 card from your deck. Usually you want to be running this at 2 at least, maybe even 3, not 100% sure. You can easily search it. You can technically, in a budget variant, what you can be doing is run triple Battle Ocean, hope you draw into it in your starting turn, and then just always search Dive, so you can always get the second effect out of special summoning 1 Marincess monster from your deck, because otherwise this card can be quite bad if you only have a Marincess monster. If you don't have a Marincess monster at all, then obviously you can summon 1 from your graveyard, but with Battle Ocean this card becomes a lot better anyway. Usually you would do the I think the cards like this at 2 or 3 and Battle Ocean at 1, so yeah, you can do it whatever you want. I tried it out with Battle Ocean at 3. It was quite funny if you drew into Battle Ocean, but sometimes the card would be dead then, because if you have 2 Battle Oceans in hand, it does nothing, and you kind of want to avoid having as many useless cards in your hand as possible. So yeah, that's that. Battle Ocean has multiple effects. Your Marincess monster control gain 200 attack flat, also each one for 600 attack for each Marincess card equipped to it, and monsters you control in the extra monster zone that were link summoned using Marincess Crystal Heart as material unaffected by your opponent card effects. Doesn't matter too much. Usually you don't use the Crystal Heart line, but in this one, since we run so many water extenders, you can easily do it. It's not impossible to do. You get the same effect of Marincess Wave if you get it out, but since we don't have the Wave Searcher, you will have turns where you don't have this, and then making it unaffected by going through the line with Crystal Heart isn't terrible. Also, this is the one that equips the monsters. If you're wondering how do I equip monsters to my link monsters, this is the card that does it. You can equip up to 3 Marincess link monsters with different names from your graveyard to that link summoned monster, and why that is important you will be seeing in a second. We have Book of Moon, very, very important cards. Well, not as important as other cards, but this one is good going second, good going first most of the time. Not against pure link decks, obviously. Against Marincess, for example, this card would do very, very little if you go a second. But going first, it could still do something, because it could stop your opponent from link summoning if they normal summon. So that can shut down the turn. But these are the slots that are just like budget disruption cards, and you can fill with good hand traps, for example. Same for Forbidden Chalice. It's a worse effect Veiler stuff impermanence. Well, it's, I don't know if it's a worse effect Veiler. It's definitely a worse impermanence in my opinion, but it has some upsides to effect Veiler because you can actually use it during your own turn. It obviously has some downsides because you can't use it during your opponent's turn. So there's that. It's a bit different than effect Veiler, but yeah, it is budget wise. Forbidden Droplet, already talked about this. Impermanence, no-brainer, you can run this card if you have it. And now the 3 Marincess Wave, mainly because we do not have the Searcher in here, but even then, this card isn't once per turn, so if you draw multiple of it, it does not matter. You have still multiple monster negates. In theory, it is a better Infinite Impermanence if you use it from your hand. If you have it on field, obviously Impermanence has still one other, I want to say decent effect. Usually it shouldn't matter too much if you look at your zone placement, but yeah, could be decent. And this card, very, 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 very crazy. If you control a link to a higher Marincess monster, all face-up monsters you control are unaffected. All face-up monsters you control, so also stuff like Abyss Dweller, if you have it, are unaffected by opponent's card effects until the end of this turn. The thing with this is you need your opponent to have a monster for this to work. So if they just have like 1 power spell trap, you can still negate it with Argonaut, but if they have 2, then you are massively screwed. Different with if you get the Battle Ocean effect out with Crystal Heart, so this is something to consider. Snowdust Giant in here, you will not really be going into this. I think I made it once because I needed it. Other than that, yes, you want to be running things like Abyss Dweller and Stealth Kragan. Other than that, yeah, there are not that many good rank 4 water monsters anymore, since Totally Awesome isn't a thing anymore, so Bahamut Shark is mainly useless, I'd say. I decided to run like triple Blue Slug and triple Sea Angel, mainly for the fact that we don't have much else that we can put in the extra deck. Once you run some of the other cards that you can be running, you can cut all of this down to 2 because you have good cards to recycle, but at the moment there's not all that much that you can be running. Instead, you could obviously put in non-water stuff and just have it in case sometimes you don't lock yourself and you need other stuff like some of the Nightmare, some Geonator, Transverser, G-Code Talker, budget hero cards. You could be running them as well, but I wanted to keep it fairly simple for this deck profile. 1 Coral Anemone, you can technically run 2. You should run 2 if you have them. If you only have 1, it doesn't matter too much. There is lots of stuff that you can tuck this card back into the extra deck with if you have to run them, of course. And with this one, you can target 1 water monster with 1500 or less attack in the graveyard, special summon to a zone this card points to. Also, you cannot special summon monsters, so you lock yourself again. And one other important effect, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 1 Marincess card in your graveyard. So usually, the problem with tucking this card back at the end of your combo is that if you have this card on field with the effect of being equipped to it, and then if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard again, you can target 1 other Marincess card in your graveyard and get added back to your hand, so you can get this effect of during the opponent's turn as well. So that is why you usually want to have 2, so you can equip this, but you obviously don't need it. It just would make the deck a tiny bit stronger. I decided to run 2 Crystal Hearts, just sometimes this card can come up. And in my opinion, it makes sense to run it in a budget build if you want to be running the most competitive build. You don't need to run it, but even then, I specifically would run it at 1, but you don't have to. The effect of this card doesn't really matter. It's kind of interesting, but it's not really a good effect. It's main in here because if you go into it with while Battle Ocean is on board, then you can make your link 4 monster unaffected, which is very, very strong. 1 Shootingcode Talker, because you can make it. It's water, it needs 2 Cybers monsters, 2+ Cybers monsters, and then you can use it. The effect isn't super crazy, but in theory it is possible to pull it off. We have triple Marincess Marbled Rock, also a card that you could be cutting down to 1. This isn't super necessary, but it has an effect that's quite helpful. That is, you can target 1 Marincess card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So this is how you can get your an enemy back after the combo, back to the extra deck. It goes, and also you can get all the other Marincess stuff back. If you milled away, for example, you can go back, you can get a monster back and then use it with Moray of Greed at the end of your turn, for example. So that works out because you will get 1 back with this one and you will get 1 back with this one. So this is how you can easily Moray of Greed if you still lack certain stuff. And the second effect isn't all too bad either. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send 1 Marincess monster from your hand to the graveyard. For that battle, monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, also you take no battle damage, is a way to protect your otherwise unaffected monster, because you can summon this card off because you use it. If you have used it for the combo, then you can equip this card to your Argonaut, and then your Argonaut, when the opponent activates a spell trap, can summon this card, and then this card has its effects on board, so you can protect your Argonaut from being run over by battle. So this is a fairly competent combo, and your Argonaut makes it so your opponent can't attack into this card either before they attack into Argonaut. So this is very nice if your opponent only has 1 monster that attack-wise can get over your Argonaut. And if you wonder what card I'm talking about, this whole deck profile, it's this one. It's one of your biggest bosses. If you can make this unaffected by card effects, then this is very, very, very strong, because it will have like around about 3,600, 800 to 4,000 something attack. which is very strong with Battle Ocean. Battle Ocean is the weak point of this deck mainly. And while this card is in your extra monster zone, your opponent's monsters cannot attack any monsters except this one, very important. And you can only use this effect once per turn, blah, blah, blah. You can target one water monster you control and one card your opponent controls, return it to their hand, so it's also good during your turn and during your opponent's turn when a spell trap card effect is activated on the field. Keep that in mind, it's only during your opponent's turn, so if your opponent uses things like evenly matched during your turn, there's nothing you can do about this, but it is what it is. Then you can special summon one of your Marincess monster cards equipped to this card, and if you do, negate that activated effect. Very, 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 very helpful. So there is all of this. Cards that you can be running instead, I've already talked about. What other cards I wanted to shout out is Deep Sea Minstrel. If your hand traps are screwing you over, things like Ash Blossom Effect, Veil, or Impermanence, or you just want to have a quick peek at what your opponent is playing, then this card can be working out, especially in a deck that runs that many monsters. So it's not absolutely terrible, but you lose lots of resources just to get a peek at your opponent's hand, which can be very strong, but I didn't include in the end because a lot of the time it did break my hand more than it actually helped me, but the effect isn't terrible. You can be running things like Tin Goldfish to extend combos if you don't want to be running the other ones, White Stingray as well, but you discard cards to kind of lose stuff as well. It's a different version of Icejade Tremora, but Tremora is a bit better in my opinion because Tremora actually can summon one of your Marincess monsters, whether this card discards one of them and then summons itself. But if you want to be going into more rank force, then I feel like this card plus this card can be a bit more helpful with this specific one. Paw of Desire is a card that you could run instead of Moray of Greed, because Paw of Desires you can fire at the end of your combo, and then there's not that many cards in your deck that you don't want to banish, because it doesn't really matter. If you already have your Marincess Wave in play anyway, then it does not matter at all. Call upon the Grave, very important because hand traps can be annoying, especially Dimensional Shifter at this point. Very, very, very upsetting cards to be playing against. If you want to be running different stuff but Book of Moon, you can be running Cynet Crosswipe. Isn't terrible in this deck. You can Tribune Cyber's monster and then target one card in the field destroyed. Destroys back row, so this can be helpful because other stuff doesn't really do that one. Let's move it to the rating section. Time to rate this deck. This specific list, obviously, not any Marincess list, not any Marincess deck, not Marincesses themselves, just this specific list. Let's look at the power level, the strength of this deck, and I would give it a fairly solid 3 out of 5, mainly because of the fact, against certain decks, this is nearly a 5 out of 5, because if they cannot be dealing with your extra deck boss monster, if it's unaffected by stuff and they cannot beat over it, then you can fairly easily beat down your opponent. It's no issue whatsoever. But if you play against a deck that is somewhat capable at dealing with it, then you have a massive issue. Back row decks can be very, very problematic as well. If they have some way of getting rid of your Battle Ocean, then you can be massively screwed because you don't really have a good way of dealing with back row, especially during your turn, and that's where most back row decks activate most of their stuff, so you have that of an issue. So against certain decks, really, really strong. Against certain other decks, really, really weak. It's a better version, in my opinion, of Cyberdarks, because Cyberdarks try to do, especially like at the start, when you just go for the, not for the extra deck lock, but for the structure deck and whatnot, Cyberdarks go to try to go for the exact same thing, one of the unaffected high attack boss monsters, but they have less viability, they have less options to go into, they have less disruptions at their disposal, they are easier shut down. If you know their choke point, it's easier to do than here, because here you can kind of chain block more stuff, you can kind of work around more stuff. Yes, getting into Battle Ocean is a big concern for this deck, so if they manage to shut down that surge, you're gonna have a hard time as well, but not as hard as Cyberdarks if you shut down one of their specific plays, because then they just can't put anything on board, and this deck can still put out something on board that does stuff. It's not too bad, it's more versatile, it has more different play options, it has more extra deck stuff that they can be doing stuff with, so in general it's a bit better, and optically it might be appealing to a different kind of people. Some might like the whole Marincess stuff more, some might like the machine stuff a bit more, but yeah, this deck, in my opinion, a solid 3 out of 5. Nothing crazy, but also nothing too bad. Let's talk about the consistency, and I say this deck is fairly consistent, but you can end up with hands where you have only spell traps and you can not really do all that much with them, or where you have too many monsters and then all you do is like have a spell trap removal and a monster that is still very high attack point and very hard to get rid of, but that is all at this point. So I'd say it's a strong 3 for me. It could be a bit stronger, Because obviously you can play more 1 or 2 card combo starters and less of the nonsense here. So if you upgrade the deck, the consistency actually gets better. Some decks, you can upgrade them as much as you want and the consistency will stay the same because the deck just isn't consistent. But this one can be more consistent. But as well, if I face them in the ladder, there were certain moments where they just don't do anything. But this is just modern Yu-Gi-Oh anyway, because you run so many hand traps and so many like power cards that sometimes it is just like a bit less consistent than it has to be. So I would say like a solid 3 for that one. When it comes to budget value, let me guess, it is also a solid 3. Not because this deck is bad. This deck can be upgraded quite a lot, and when you upgrade it, it is not bad at all. You can easily go into Abyss Dweller, which can be very helpful in today's meta. It has certain other options. Unaffected isn't too bad. You have options to run lots of different hand traps, very good in a deck, especially because hand traps, depending on what's good in the meta, they can deal with it usually the best, sadly, but it is what it is. And yeah, that is why this deck, budget-wise, is a bit problematic, because the only card that you can be running in other decks is Cynet Mining. The other stuff is fairly reduced to Marincess. So if you craft Marincess cards, don't expect them to really be run in any other deck than Marincess. Besides Coral and Enemy, you can run them in some water decks, so that's fine. Other than that, yeah, you lack playability in different variants, and you lack different variants in general, but you will have a fairly decent deck, and you will have a deck that is easily upgradable. So budget value, I'd also give it a 3. Let's move on to the replay section. Alright, the replay against, well, it's a bit of a surprise. It's going to be a very anime-like duel, especially considering Reigns is a thing. And I might have made a tiny mistake here with my starting hand. There was a thought behind this, because obviously I could have just used Tremora here to summon Springirl, and then Springirl do the combo, add Springirl back, use the Springirl effect to summon it again, and then still have my normal summon up at this point. You still have Sleepy Maiden, so we have plenty of combos. But I thought if I use the Springirl effect to send stuff to the graveyard, maybe I will hit one of the good Marincess monsters, and then I could still add it back to the hand and summon it with Tremora later. But I could have also then summoned it with Coral and Enemy, so it wouldn't matter too much in the end. It was a bit of an oversight by me here, or a bit of a, well, wrong play here, because you would have one extra extension at this point. Didn't really matter though at all. We go into Blue Slug. Blue Slug adds Springirl back. Springirl decides to mill, and we hit nothing important that helps us whatsoever. One Cynet Mining here doesn't do all that much. Now I have to go into Sleepy Maiden, because I do not have a Marincess card in the graveyard that I could have banished, like a Marincess monster. So we have to go into Sleepy Maiden, and that puts us in a bit of an annoying position, because now we cannot use the effect of Marincess Sea Angel at this point, because Sea Angel also needs a level 4 lore, so we have to adjust the combo a tiny bit. So we can summon this one now, we go into an enemy, and the thing is, technically I could have now summoned Springirl, but the thing with Springirl is, or with an enemy, is actually you have to summon to a zone this card points to. So if I now go for Springirl and then go into the whole combo with Sea Angel, we have a bit of an issue, because then we can't use the Coral and Enemy effect. So I had to do this one first as well, and since we still don't have a level 4 lower monster in the graveyard, we had to go into the Link 3 first. I do this now, I could have done this later on, didn't really matter too much, but I kind of wanted to preferably have one of this one in the graveyard, just because this one can equip one of my Link monsters as well to my boss monster, and we have an access to the Link 4 anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I wanted to be able to get into Battle Ocean. Now we get this card back to the hand actually, so we could still extend. I think I went for the Crystal Heart play, not sure if I did it in the end, but it would have been smart to do so. We tucked that one back into the extra deck, so we have it for the next turn. You don't have to do it. Usually you want to have it equipped so you can get the effect off again, but there wasn't really anything in the graveyard that I really wanted to have back. Yeah, Springirl would have been nice, but there's different ways of getting this one back as well, so it didn't overly matter, and this would secure that we have a good Link 2 still in our extra deck for the next turn. Now we use Springirl to go to Sea Angel, and with Sea Angel we can get Battle Ocean. Obviously we want to activate Battle Ocean here, and yeah, then I decided to go for the thing, and I'm pretty sure I did the Crystal Heart play here. So we have an unaffected boss monster, very important. So in the end it didn't matter that much that I held Icejade there, because in the end it did matter, it did come up, it did do its job. So yeah, that is what happened. So you can kind of see like how you have to play right with the combo a bit, depending on what you want to be going into, because in the end you want to be ending on this. And you want it to be unaffected by stuff. Either you do it by having Wave in your hand, which is less likely in this version because we do not run the Link 3 that searches it, or you want it to be through Crystal Heart, because that is what makes this card amazing. This card by itself is very strong, but it's obviously amazing if you can make it be unaffected by opponent's card effects. Obviously, that is, I think, only as long as this card is on board. Not sure if this is an effect that goes beyond this, but I think it's as long as this card is on board. So yeah, that is that. We have now the equipment of our 2 cards in graveyard, because technically we could have equipped this one as well. I made a bit of a mistake here because I thought, oh, I need space for my 2 cards in hand, but I would have had enough space anyway. You want to equip 3 here so we have more attack points. In the end, the attack points rarely matter, but your opponent can easily go up to like 3,500, and if you then special summon one of them out, you're only at 3,100, so it's a bit annoying. You obviously should have used the 3rd one here, but you always, one of the things that why I wanted to show this replay is you always want to leave enough space so you can use your spell traps that you will have in hand that do stuff during your opponent's turn. The thing is, Wave can be activated from your hand, so if you don't have enough space for Wave to be activated, that is usually fine. Then you just use one of the other ones first, especially if the card is already unaffected. If you need Wave to make your monsters be unaffected by card effects, then you might want to keep one of your disruptions in hand or only go for the 2 monsters. So this is something to keep in mind with that one. But I'm not like a Marincess main player, so a bit difficult. So I decided to fix my mistake by equipping this from the graveyard by using the effect of Sleepy Maiden. Obviously you'd rather have this in grave for a different time, but yeah, that fixed my mistake in testing. So yeah, I was still quite new to the deck, and hope you understand. We play against Trickstars, funny enough. They used Into the Void, now they go for Trickstar Cantina, and I thought, well, why not negate this? If they can't get their field spell, that is probably good for us. So I decided, yeah, let's use this to negate. Possibly would have been better to use Forbidden Droplet so the opponent can't respond with a monster effect to it. I forgot that they might have a Licorice in hand and can just swap it out and then they get the effect through. So this might have made it a lot easier if we would have done it that way. But also wasn't sure if they count as spell traps while they're on the field or if they count as monsters when they're sent by this. So I wasn't 100% sure if you could do it this way or not. And whenever I'm not 100% sure, I try to go for the safe play, because then I can still win. If I screw this up, then I lose lots of advantage on here. So yeah, a bit annoying. I thought let's not let them search it even more, because technically that can be a bit problematic, and they use this for, oh, let's just do chain summoning here. Very, very fun. Didn't really matter overly that much, because there's not that many things that Trickstars can do against unaffected monsters. Yes, they can beat over it in theory if they get to it, but we still had the effect of Forbidden Droplet. I sent the monster now to just make sure that they can't swap out again. Possibly would have been better to keep the marbled monster on board as well. Could have gotten rid of one of those. Like I said, if you're not 100% sure, then go for the play that isn't the riskiest play at all. But yeah, that is what I decided to do, but you can do it better if you have more knowledge about these kind of things than I might have. They go into Trickstar Bloom to get Nightshade back to be able to go into a Link 4, and they let me draw lots of different cards here. Doesn't really matter too much for them. I just get lots of damage, but not enough to finish me in the slightest. So I don't know if it's good to let your opponent draw a card to do, I don't know, was it 1,000 damage in the end, or even a bit more than that. 1,000, no, that's exactly 1,000 damage. So not sure that is worth it for giving me another card, because Upstart Goblin exists and people do run this card. So in the end, not too good if I'm not mistaken. I get lots of cards for the next turn. Maybe they thought they were going to have a combo that finishes me off here. Wasn't quite sure about that one though, and I'm not sure they have an extra deck monster that gets over my one. Even if they did, I would still have enough plays to not lose the game here. Let's just skip through the combos. They're just going into a Borrelsword Dragon. Yeah, they had one quite old school. I think that was used when Trickstars were still good in the TCG. Not have used this recently, but yeah, it does the job. It gets rid of my monster, and now I have to rebuild, but gladly they gave me more cards, and this is never a good thing, especially if you give it to a combo deck. I still decided to run one Sea Star back then. I fitted the combo by that point, but it doesn't really matter. It could have been any other normal summonable Marincess monster at this point. We go into Blue Slug. This gets negated, and this technically could be a bit of an issue if we didn't have a normal summonable monster. We have Blue Slug here. We use Blue Slug's effect to get Argonaut back to the deck because we want this as a combo piece. Now we have an enemy, we can get one card back, and we get Springirl back. Now we can use this one to go into Sea Angel again. Sea Angel can get us back one of the cards. We mill one other good card. We have Marincess Dive. Now we could summon from the graveyard, but I decided to summon from deck. Blue Tang does lots of different things. We dump this one. Blue Tang, this one then summons itself. Good old Mandarin gets banished. We still have Crystal Heart, so we make it unaffected. We go into Argonaut. Argonaut then gets equipped by lots of different things here. And we also add Sea Star back, not that it matters. But yeah, send them to the hand and attack for a game here. So the Sea Star effect didn't really matter. I have just replaced Sea Star with one of the ones that cannot be destroyed by battle. So we would have, that blocks been destroyed by card effects. So we would have still had a normal summonable level 4 or lower Marincess monster in hand, just not Sea Star, but the other one, because I felt like the protection was a lot better than the Sea Star one, although you get it to the graveyard. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.